Comeback mechanics. They've always been a bit of a contentious concept in the fighting game world, uncharitably viewed as rewarding a player for losing, and yet their popularity only seems to be going up as time passes. As for Super Smash Bros., well, the series has never exactly been shy about joining the trend. Today, I'm going to be diving into the pros and cons of some of Smash's most extreme mechanics, and I'll be assisted by two players who have had their fair share of experience in the area. Peanut, one of the best Little Mac players in the world, and Armadillo, one of the best Lucario players, will be dropping by to provide their insight. Should be a good time. Both these guys are active on a number of platforms and are also available to book for lessons on Medify if you'd like to level up, so be sure to check the description and pinned comment for links. Finally, the topic of this video was voted on by my supporters through Patreon, YouTube memberships, and Twitch subscription. If you'd like to make your voice heard for what the next episode should be, as well as get some other cool perks like early videos and Discord access, links for these will be in the description and pinned comment as well. Let's do it! Let's clear some terminology up to make sure that we're all on the same page. Platform fighters, the video game genre Smash is a part of, are inherently very comeback heavy due to the nature of the genre's win condition. While there have been some entries which explore additional design space, the vast majority of competitive platform fighter gameplay is purely based around ring outs, knocking your opponent off any side of the screen. Unlike, say, in Street Fighter, where characters are always guaranteed to survive a certain amount of punishment, there's no floor on the number of hits a player needs to take before they lose one of their stocks in Smash. As much as a solid spike or shield break may be able to cause a comeback though, I think it's probably a bit of a stretch to call those specifically comeback mechanics. In Smash, I consider the term to mean a tool that makes your character significantly more powerful, which requires a delay before it's active. Probably the most classic example being Lucario with his aura. As Lucario takes damage and loses stocks in comparison to his opponent, his aura starts to build, which universally increases the damage and knockback he can output and also alters a number of his moves in other ways, like Aura Sphere's increased radius or Extreme Speed's additional range. Another example would include something like Terry's Go Meter, which gives him access to the powerful super moves Buster Wolf and Power Geyser only when he's at 100% damage or higher. On top of these kinds of moves, which I'll refer to as hard comeback mechanics, I also generally expand the definition to include moves which facilitate similar spikes in power without that power directly tied to being damaged, which I'll call a soft comeback mechanic. Wario's Waft would be a good example of this. It still allows him to steal games once it builds up, but this build-up happens passively over time or by chomping on things, not by Wario getting hit or losing one of his stocks. I'm comfortable folding moves like this into the definition since, yes, it can act as a win more function in addition to helping stage a comeback, but in reality, the same actually applies to many of Smash's quote-unquote proper comeback mechanics. There are a few comeback mechanics which are truly designed mostly to help characters in losing positions, but these are actually somewhat few and far between. And then there are comeback mechanics with both hard and soft elements. Little Mac's single-use KO punch does have its power meter filled by taking damage, but also when Little Mac deals damage himself. Cloud's limit meter and Joker's Rebellion gauge are filled the same way, granting them access to powerful limit break moves and Arsene, respectively, and these characters also have further ways to fill their meters up manually. So with the mechanics terminology taken care of, we can now move on to the mechanics themselves. I said earlier that comeback mechanics are a bit of a controversial topic, and something that often comes up in the conversation is how they affect character balance. It's important to note, however, that comeback mechanics don't inherently create unbalanced characters. They do create some potentially extreme power spikes in certain stages of the game, but provided the other stages are appropriately balanced to account for this so that the character's overall power is in line with the rest of the cast, in theory, what you'll end up with is a balanced character. Take Sephiroth's One Wing form, for example, which activates when he's taken enough damage and grants him additional mobility, damage output, and armor on his smash attacks. With the wing in effect, Sephiroth is undoubtedly a fantastic character, easily one of the best in the game, but his base moveset is fairly honest and actually a bit precise and easy to overwhelm, so things roughly balance out here. Lucario's aura grants him even more raw power, eventually allowing him to kill you at 30%, but you wouldn't necessarily still be at 30% if you were fighting a character with better neutral options than Lucario has access to. He might have been able to win neutral a few more times in the match and put you at 60, 80, 100%, much more reasonable percents to die at. What people tend to walk away from these kinds of experiences with, however, is more just the moment when they died at 30%. Humans have an ingrained phenomenon called negativity bias, meaning that if you're exposed to an equally positive and negative experience, the negative one is going to leave more of a vivid impression. Sure, you may remember stuffing Wario's stubby limbs out over and over with your much better hitboxes, but you'll remember the one time he did get in and waft you more. This is certainly one contributing factor to the frustration comeback mechanics can invoke, but it's not all a matter of perception. There are absolutely tangible changes to the gameplay as well. Most notably, comeback mechanics have a habit of encouraging one of the most illegal, despised words in the platform fighter world: camping.
Gloomy has that waft. Axiom needs 100% to get Rage Driver online to get a similar tactic in his arsenal, and Axiom's well aware of that.
Camping is, in short, the refusal to engage with your opponent. Taking Little Mac's KO punch as an example, this is one of the most destructive comeback mechanics in the game. A massive unblockable hitbox that starts killing small characters around 20%. It's also a temporary comeback mechanic. Little Mac only gets one attempt to use it, which you can dodge, and if you wait for the perfect moment, you can also hit him right out of it. So, if you haven't seen that perfect moment yet, why on earth would you try and challenge this kind of tool?
Even if the opponent is already a kill percent to a Mac forward tilt or something, they will still run away and be scared. Even though they should really be doing that already. I don't know why they weren't before. But once I have KO punch, it's clear that the opponent is infinitely more terrified than they were before, regardless of like what stock they're on or what percent they're at.
It creates gameplay that's very polarizing, and the same thing can be said for Lucario's aura, although maybe not nearly to the same degree.
Camping isn't quite as encouraged against a Lucario with high aura, since there's no way to remove it outside of a definitive kill blow, and, in fact, non-committal hits only make the problem worse. But it can still discourage risk-taking on both sides, Lucario avoiding the loss of aura and the opponent avoiding aura, and fundamentally, camping is essentially just the natural conclusion of risk avoidance.
I've made a huge mistake.
It also means that a lot of the time the Lucario player is either going to get to make proper use of their aura and kill their opponent very early, or alternatively, they'll lose the opportunity by dying early themselves. In either case, one player in these scenarios has been shortchanged, and remember, whoever that was will typically walk away with a stronger impression of the moment. The players I interviewed for this video are top representatives of some of the most textbook, integral comeback mechanics in Smash that their characters' kits are heavily designed around, and yet despite this, they'd both prefer to see the roles of these mechanics reduced in order to get around some of these extremes.
I'd rather aura have less of an impact than it currently does, just because I think it would make him more satisfying to play at like more percents rather than fun to play only at higher percents. And it's not only like that for me, like you learn to enjoy playing Lucario even at lower percents or like with less aura once you play him enough. But I think aura being less of a factor would just be cooler. Part of it that I think is a little weird is that they made the aura cap like super high. Like they made it so you get max aura on a stock at 190%. One thing I think would make aura a better mechanic is if they took away the stock difference multiplier. So basically, if you're Lucario and you're up on your opponent by a stock, that takes away aura, and I don't think that should be a thing. And I think for the other way around, like if you're Lucario and you're losing to your opponent in stocks, I don't think you should get more aura from that.
Yeah, people have asked before, like, if you could change, Mac's comeback mechanic, like, what would you do? I think he needs his comeback mechanic. Like, he needs KO punch. Without it, he would be, like, absolute dog water, more than he already is. But I also think that it's so unfun and so polarizing and so stupid. Little Mac can kill people at like 20%, 30% for simply wanting to play the video game. KO punch is very frustrating for both parties because the only way to get rid of it is to interact in most cases, but interacting also means potentially dying at a very early percent for the opponent. And for Mac, there's god-awful amounts of end lag on KO punch, so if you miss, you're essentially dead. So it's very frustrating for both people. Something like Star Punch would be better than an actual meter. Maybe if you parry a hit, you get a star, and then you use Neutral B and it does damage and knock Mac depending on how many stars you have. But, if you get hit, you lose all your stars, so that's the kind of gamble. And it makes you have to think more. It makes you have to fish and bait for certain, you know, parries or maybe hits to get those stars. It makes you look for certain habits. It adds more depth to the character, and I think that would be really fun for both sides because you legitimately earned those stars instead of just getting hit or getting a hit and then having a comeback mechanic that kills at 20.
Their attitudes here make a lot of sense when you learn that, possibly surprisingly, their decisions to play these characters had absolutely nothing to do with comeback mechanics.
I started playing Lucario in Smash 4 after 2 got second at Frostbite 2017. It really inspired me because it was just like a character that I hadn't really seen a lot. He was doing a lot of things that I didn't really understand. And I was like, that stuff just looks cool to learn. Whether he had an aura or not, it doesn't really make a difference to me. I just think his moves are really cool. I think Aura Sphere is super sick. You can like use a charge hitbox, cancel into other moves, do like cool combos. He has really fun movement. None of that has to do with Aura. It's all just stuff that's in his kit. And that's what makes me really like playing him. He's just fun to control, fun to do combos with, and you can be really creative.
I picked Mac specifically because after I unlocked all the characters, I looked at the roster and I immediately recognized everybody on the roster just by name or by appearance, except for Little Mac. I didn't know his background. I didn't know what game he came from, whatever. And he also looked weak. Like, just canonically, I mean, like, Mario has, like, fireball powers, and Sonic is faster than the speed of sound, and Palutena is a literal goddess, and Mac just is a dude with fists. He just boxes, and I'm like, that piqued my interest. And then when I played him, he felt simplistic. Just like, as a casual newcomer, he just felt simplistic. Like, you just smash attack. It's pretty simplistic. It's pretty cool. And also against, like, bots and in World of Light, he was mad good with spirits. I was like, this is nice. As time went on, I got like better and I started playing more serious.
Super Smash Bros. Is an enormous game, and yet its design space is so enormous that the pickings for a lot of the characters' playstyles are still fairly slim. Do you really, really love the idea of playing a transforming character? The idea of playing multiple characters in one is so intriguing that nothing else jumps at you in the same way? Well, here you go. Take your pick. That's what you got to work with.
What about a ninja? A duo?
Any of these ideas could be the irresistible hook that pulls you in, and if that hook was, say, a ground-based boxer, there's really no substitute for Little Mac. And just because the boxer concept was what hooked you, that doesn't mean you're not going to have to deal with everything the character brings to the table, no matter how potentially frustrating it may be. Lucario's interesting combo and movement techniques were the big hook for Armadillo, but Lucario could also just as easily be someone's favorite Pokemon. Your favorite Pokemon, or video game character in general, leaves you with a choice of one. I talk a lot about canon in Super Smash Bros., which has turned out not to be a universally accepted way of looking at the game. On my second channel, MockRock Talk, for example, I recently did a tier list looking at 100 Smash candidates, and the most common complaint I got was that I weighed their canon abilities too heavily. There are a number of reasons I prefer this approach, but one of them is that there's less risk of a player being disappointed if their expectations for a character they enjoy aren't met. Take Simon and Richter Belmont, for example. If you liked how the Belmonts worked in Castlevania, it doesn't guarantee you'll like them in Super Smash Bros., but the fact that they're zoners with clunky movement won't catch you off guard. No character is perfect. You might not like how weak their recovery is compared to Castlevania's canon abilities, for example, but they're generally a pretty faithful translation. And if you don't enjoy playing them in Smash, it'll be because you don't like how Castlevania feels in a platform fighter, not because they don't feel like they're from Castlevania. In the case of Little Mac or Lucario, though,
These comeback mechanics have been mostly or entirely pulled out of thin air for Smash, so forcing Super Armor, or B-Reverse, or Punch-Out, or Pokemon fans to deal with something so polarizing if they want to use the characters is a risky move, to put it lightly. There will certainly be players who do enjoy using these elements, but if you want lots of people to love your character design, adding love it or hate it ideas may be giving them an unfairly rough start. I think a better place to implement something like this would be along the lines of Kazuya's Rage mechanic. Kazuya comes from Tekken, a 3D fighting game with a conventional life bar, so Rage is obviously going to work a bit different between the series, but it is something that exists in Tekken. Rage has proved to be a contentious mechanic in Kazuya's home series as well, but even if you're a Tekken fan who doesn't love how Rage works there, you'll at least be prepared for the idea of his Smash incarnation coming equipped with a comeback mechanic. It also helps that out of all the comeback mechanics in Smash, this is one of the less polarizing ones. It's good, no nobody's going to complain about a 10% damage boost on everything, and it also unlocks Rage Drive, a single-use command grab that hits incredibly hard, but this is actually not too far out of line with Kazuya's general balancing around explosive damage output. And even outside of Rage Drive, he already has access to multiple command grabs. It's also able to be more resilient as a result of these other balancing factors. After getting it at 100% damage, Kazuya can lose it by being hit or by whiffing the move, but there's leeway built into it. It's not quite as strict as getting hit or whiffing it once. It's a decidedly unrisky way to implement a comeback mechanic, a slightly better tool on a character who's already extremely comeback heavy by nature, and I'm not saying this is the power level that all combat mechanics need to stop at, but I would argue that hewing a bit closer to this kind of template is more likely to result in a roster enjoyed by more of the player base, especially for characters who don't naturally lend themselves to heavy polarization. Smash does have other comeback mechanics which fit more comfortably into the character's game plans, and I think these have trended towards the more successful takes on the idea. I'm particularly fond of the mechanics Cloud and Joker use because they're powerful without being instant win mechanics and also have a substantial amount of counterplay involved, both in terms of activating them and making use of them.
I think the better designed comeback mechanics are something along the lines of Cloud's limit. There's a timer like on limit, so you are forced to use something. So like limit, you can actually camp out. I think it's like 15 seconds and it goes away. So if you're really scared of limit, you don't have to approach it. But if you feel like you can, outplay it and go for it, finishing touch kills you earlier, but it does like no damage. And if you miss, you are stuck in end lag for years, generations. It's fine. I don't think limit is broken.
Cloud does have a timer on his limit meter, a huge change from Smash 4 that makes the mechanic a lot more reasonable, but the caveat to this is that Cloud is already a fairly mobile character and a full limit meter makes him even more mobile, so trying to camp him out until it goes away can potentially go very poorly for you. Alternatively, it could also go very well and you could avoid some of his biggest threats. It's a player and character matchup decision you need to be making in the heat of the moment. The same can be said for Joker, and his Rebellion gauge is even more interactive since attacking him at the wrong time will let him fill it faster, but attacking him at the right time will burn the gauge back down, so there's constant decision making at play here. Steve's Diamond Tools are a soft comeback mechanic that somewhat falls into this category since there are many ways to deny him the opportunity to get the necessary materials, but generally speaking, he's still going to get at least one diamond in most matches, and the only way to neutralize it after he does is to take his stock. That's still a more favorable form of interaction compared to the likes of Terry or Lucario, which have to be neutralized via stock taking, and even these compare well to something like Wario's Waft. This move, strictly speaking, doesn't really have much counterplay involved at all. It's a soft comeback mechanic that inevitably fills up, and it even persists between stocks, so killing Wario fast enough to prevent Waft ever coming online isn't realistic most of the time. That said, if I told you I hated everything about Waft, I'd be lying. While it's not the most decision-heavy comeback mechanic to burn thanks to mostly being used in conjunction with a few stable combos, interesting techniques and decisions about when to use it still can and do occur. And Waft also greatly contributes to Wario being one of the most entertaining characters for me to watch. While it can be seen as a bit of a cheap crutch to artificially create extra hype during a game, there's no arguing that, for better or worse, making things more comeback heavy is a good way to please a crowd.
Hold on. Sephiroth is a comeback character, Koopa. Let's see. Is it gonna work out for him? Yo!
Oh my god!
While maybe not as universally endearing, there's also a lot to be said for the shakeups to the game state that comeback mechanics can cause.
As Lucario gets more aura in a match, there's two ways the opponent will tend to play. Either the opponent will start getting really greedy, trying to kill you as quickly as they can, just to like get rid of your aura, which me as a Lucario player, I obviously know you want to take my stock away, right? So I'm going to play more safe. I'm going to look out for your kill moves. Or they're going to play more passive and scared because they know you have aura and they don't want to like lose their stock super early. It really just depends on the player and the character, but most of the time it's probably better just to like play normal.
People will either camp or some people actually play more aggressive to try to get KO Punch like off of me, because the way KO Punch works, a lot of people have the misconception of, oh, it's damage based. Or it's like, oh, just hit him. What you do is you put Mac in a tumble. So the best way to get rid of Mac's KO Punch is to grab him and just throw him, because most throws will put you in a tumble in this game. But also, to grab Mac, you have to approach. Someone like Roy, has to like get in on him to do something. Someone like Ice Climbers, they gotta get in to actually get rid of it, so it's a big problem for them. Someone like Falco, even Falco Fox, like they have lasers, but that's not gonna put Mac in a tumble. You gotta actually do something about it. If it calls for it and like they're still playing really scared of KO punch and it looks like they're playing in a way that they're not comfortable with, I just won't use KO punch. I'll just keep going, and like you said, it's like a mind game or some kind of bait at this point, because they're gonna keep playing scared, and KO punch goes through shield too, so if they have a shield habit, I'll try to exploit that. Or if they have the jump out of hit stun thing, that's good too, because I can fake stuff together and it'll still work because they're trying to jump out of stuff.
Yes, camping is a possible outcome, but even the thought process behind that decision is more nuanced than it may first appear, and I've been going with the notion that camping is even inherently a negative thing. This kind of decision making also exists on every character to some degree, because modern Smash titles have started incorporating the kind of universal hard comeback mechanic that's popped up more and more in modern fighting games, giving everyone a boost to the knockback their attacks do as they take more damage.
This system has been dubbed Rage by the player base. Yes, a little bit confusing considering that Kazuya now has a mechanic officially called Rage, but hey, the universal version got there first. As I alluded to at the beginning, these kinds of systems are often derided in fighting games as a cheap way to artificially boost a less experienced player's odds against someone more experienced. A blue shell from Mario Kart in an environment that was never supposed to support blue shells. And given Smash's casual background that's only recently started truly paying attention to the competitive scene, I doubt Rage was immune from this design consideration. However, whether intentional or not, I actually think this is a pretty well done universal comeback mechanic, and there are some interesting nuances to it as well, particularly the way it inherently benefits slower, heavier characters more than fast, light ones, as the heavier ones will be able to survive long enough to take better advantage of it. Considering that the scales have historically been massively tipped in favor of lightweight characters in competitive Smash, anything to help level the playing field is worth at least some thought. The self-balancing factor also scales relatively smoothly as percent climbs, and the effect in Ultimate isn't so extreme that even at high percents it can single-handedly dominate the latter half of a stock in the same way it could in Smash 4. In this game, the mechanic was 30% stronger, which was admittedly somewhat excessive, and that boost also applied to the parts of multi-hit attacks which were never intended to be used as launchers, which could result in some pretty weird behavior. This happened because multi-hit moves often have fixed knockback, or knockback that doesn't scale up with your percent, and is often really high knockback to make sure the opponent is dragged along with the attacker. Well, at least that's the theory. Anyone who actually plays multi-hit characters in Smash will tell you that reality doesn't always quite work out that way. Apply some heavy rage to this, and there you go. Jank. This is nothing new to the series for the record, but Rage definitely made it a lot worse. Ultimate removed Rage from all fixed knockback hitboxes, and his take on the mechanic is much more refined overall, although it's still not perfect. It's never effectively communicated to the players on screen during a match, for example. Characters do get some angry effects that somewhat imply the idea, but this only starts happening after they've taken 100% damage, and Rage actually starts kicking in a long time before that, at 35%. There's not really a proper way to learn how this mechanic actually works without looking it up from a third-party source. It also universally affects knockback on all moves, including ones obviously meant to be used as combo starters, meaning that it can counterintuitively make stocks last longer in certain scenarios. This could be mitigated by having Rage only kick in on high knockback moves, but I think the mechanic may be more effective if it scaled characters' damage rather than knockback. This issue would then be fixed, and it would also turn the mechanic into more of a pure comeback system. Once your opponent is at the percentage to lose their stock, inflicting additional damage becomes less impactful, and the focus instead shifts to looking for kill moves, and the higher the percent, the more true this becomes. This proposed take on Rage would naturally scale by the gap in your percentages, allowing you to bring your opponent up to your level and then smoothly losing effectiveness. Still, all things considered, given Smash's casual origins, one of the most casual-oriented aspects of its design to slip into competitive play has been implemented surprisingly tastefully, and while there are some character-specific comeback mechanics which haven't been so lucky, there have also been plenty of examples that were done very well. I'm not going to say that any of them are perfect. I would actually argue that limit breaks are slightly underemphasized in Cloud's kit. Arsene is maybe just a bit too easy to access, and making Sephiroth so light and yet so reliant on an otherwise very fair comeback mechanic is a bit of a low blow, but there's solid foundations regardless, and these are just tuning issues. And if we're reviewing comeback mechanics, there actually is one more universal one which doesn't come up in conversation as often: the invincibility a player gets when respawning, which allows an opportunity to make a completely risk-free attack or read attempt on an opponent who has no choice but to run away. This can be surprisingly powerful, to the point where players often feel more comfortable retreating to the ledge rather than trying to avoid it on stage, a position generally regarded as being very disadvantageous stages in regular gameplay. The extensive invincibility time probably stems from being tuned for other, more casual game modes with additional players and larger stages, but in single battles, it feels a bit excessive, and I think Ultimate missed an opportunity not to uniquely tune it for one-on-one fights the same way it started to do for other gameplay elements. It's telling that essentially no other platform fighter has implemented this particular mechanic with anywhere near as heavy a hand as Smash has done. Then again, maybe being a bit heavy-handed was the point. Make no mistake, Smash has always been absurd, and its comeback mechanics are very much in line with this. Okay, some of them are bullshit. They can be the fun kind of bullshit, though, and thinking of them as a series of unique challenges to overcome that no other game on the planet can offer, that's probably going to be a good way to preserve your sanity.
Honestly, a problem with Ultimate in general is like people not learning matches, but I think if people are like struggling with comeback mechanics, the best thing is to like learn everything you can about them, like especially if you're fighting against them. Learn what they do, learn how they affect the characters, and learn like how to play around them.
Comeback mechanics are probably always going to be a prominent part of this series, and while there are some further refinements I'd like to see moving forward, in the meantime, what can we really do besides hit the lab, hold on for dear life, and smile in the face of adversity?
Are you smiling? I can't tell.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and huge thanks once again to Peanut and Armadillo for sharing their insights. Please remember to check them out. Let me know your thoughts on comeback mechanics, and take a look at my Patreon, YouTube membership, or Twitch to vote on the next episode and for some other cool perks. Later, people!